I adjusted the collar of my Italian shirt as I gazed at the Manhattan skyline through the windows of my 47th floor office. At 38, I had built a real estate empire that stretched from Tribeca to the Upper East Side, but success came at a price. My trips to Hong Kong and Singapore consumed 15 days a month, closing million-dollar deals that financed the luxurious lifestyle I shared with Sarah. "Honey, I have to travel again on Monday," I said on the phone, watching the frenetic movement of Fifth Avenue below. "The Singapore contract won't close itself." On the other end of the line, Sarah sighed with barely concealed irritation. "2 more weeks, Marcus. You just got back from your last trip." "It's temporary, honey. After this, we'll have the financial freedom we've always dreamed of." I smiled, unaware that Sarah had already found her own version of freedom. I met Sarah Williams 6 years ago, when she still had a promising career in marketing. She gave it all up for a life of privilege when she married me. The $3.2 million apartment on the Upper West Side, the shopping on Madison Avenue, and the dinners at Manhattan's finest restaurants seemed to make up for my constant absence. At least that's what I believed. Sarah had always been independent, but in recent months I noticed a subtle change. She seemed happier when I was away, more energetic, more careful with her appearance. At first I thought she had finally adjusted to our lifestyle, but something in the back of my mind whispered that there was more to the story. That Thursday afternoon, as I was closing another deal via video conference with Asian investors, my phone vibrated with a bank notification. Sarah had made an unusual purchase, $200 worth of lingerie from Victoria's Secret. I frowned. Sarah rarely bought lingerie, and when she did, she always showed it to me first, excited about her choices. A strange chill ran down my spine. I opened my laptop and began discreetly checking the bank statements for the last few months. Frequent lunches in Soho, purchases at boutiques Sarah never mentioned, and spending at places she definitely didn't frequent when I was home. "Interesting," I muttered, my analytical mind already processing patterns. 15 years of building international businesses had taught me to spot signs of trouble before they became crises, and all the signs were pointing in a direction I'd rather not consider. I picked up the phone and dialed James Morton, my accountant and longtime friend. "James, I need a favor. Can you arrange a discreet audit of all our joint accounts? And also, I want a recommendation for a private investigator, the best you can find." "Marital problems, Marcus?" James asked cautiously. "I hope not," I replied, watching the lights of Hong Kong reflect off the glass. "But in business, it's always better to have information before making decisions. And from what I'm seeing, I may need to make some decisions very soon." While I was planning my silent investigation on the other side of the world, Sarah was crossing a line that would change our lives forever. I just didn't know yet how deeply she had decided to betray me. That night, lying alone in my bed in a 5-star hotel in Hong Kong, I realized that my 5-year marriage might have been an illusion I had refused to see. But if Sarah thought she could fool me, she was about to find out that she had completely underestimated the man she had married. 3 weeks later, still on a business trip abroad, I received the first report from Rebecca Santos, the private investigator I had hired. The photos were crystal clear and devastating. My wife walking hand in hand with a younger man entering his apartment, kissing passionately at the entrance to Central Park. "Mr. Chen," Rebecca said during our encrypted video call, "I can confirm that your wife is having an extramarital affair. The man's name is Dylan Rodriguez, a 29-year-old yoga instructor. They met at Namaste Studio 3 blocks from your apartment." I studied the photos in silence. 5 years of marriage reduced to digital images of betrayal. But what hurt me most wasn't the infidelity itself. It was the look on Sarah's face. She looked genuinely happy, more radiant than I'd seen her in years. "But there's something else you need to know," Rebecca continued. "Your wife has made some suspicious financial transactions in recent weeks. She sent me detailed documents via secure email. Transfers of $5,000 from our joint account, discreet sales of jewelry I had given Sarah, a $15,000 Rolex and a diamond necklace, as well as consultations with divorce lawyers specializing in property division. She's not just having an affair," I muttered, feeling a mixture of anger and admiration for her audacity. "She's planning to rob me." "Exactly. and based on her pattern of behavior, I believe she's planning to move things along, perhaps when you return from this trip." I hung up and stared at the Tokyo skyline for several long minutes. Sarah wasn't just a cheating wife. She was a cheating wife who had become a calculating thief. This completely changed my approach to the situation. I picked up the phone and dialed James Morton in New York. "James, I want you to execute Phoenix. Plan immediately," I said, using the code name we had created years ago to protect my assets in case of emergencies. "Transfer everything from the joint accounts to the offshore trusts. Activate the asset protection clauses. And James, I want you to do this tonight. Sarah can't have access to another penny until I resolve this situation personally." "Understood. Marcus, will you give her some explanation?" I smiled coldly. "Oh, I'll give her more than an explanation. I'll teach her a lesson she'll never forget. Sarah thinks she's playing chess, but I've been playing this game much longer, and she's about to find out the difference between an amateur and a professional." The Phoenix plan was something I had put together years before the wedding when my lawyers warned me about the risks of having assets tied up in a relationship. All my major assets were protected through a complex network of offshore trusts, international holding companies, and corporate structures that Sarah didn't even know existed. The $3.2 million apartment, technically owned by a corporation in the Cayman Islands. The companies that generated millions a year structured through holding companies in jurisdictions that didn't recognize U.S. divorce decisions. The bank accounts Sarah believed were ours, just operating accounts with a fraction of the real money. As I orchestrated my counteroffensive from Japan, I received more reports from Rebecca. Sarah and her lover were celebrating in his modest Queen's apartment, toasting with cheap champagne, what they believed to be the beginning of a life together, financed by my money. "Innocence," I muttered, looking at the photos of them laughing and kissing. "They have no idea what's coming." James called me back in the early hours of the morning to confirm that all the transfers had been made. Sarah would wake up the next morning as a rich woman, but by the end of the week she would discover that it was just an illusion I had allowed her to live in. "Marcus," James said, "I know this must be devastating for you. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" I looked once more at the photos of Sarah in the arms of another man, spending my money to finance her betrayal. "James, in business, I've learned that you can't have half forgiveness or half revenge. Either you're completely respected or completely disrespected." Sarah made her choice. Now she's going to find out the consequences of trying to cheat someone who always thinks 5 steps ahead. The rules of the game had completely changed, but Sarah still didn't know she was playing a game I had already won before she even started. I cancelled my flight and returned to New York a day earlier than planned. It was time to end this charade and confront my wife face to face. I sent her a simple message: "Flight cancelled. I'll be there at 3 p.m. Can't wait to see you." When I walked into our apartment at 3:15 p.m., I found Sarah visibly nervous, obsessively checking that everything was in place. I noticed immediately that she had hidden something. There was an artificial tension in her movements, like someone playing the role of a devoted wife. "Hi, honey, what a surprise you're back early," Sarah said, kissing me on the cheek. I noticed that she didn't return my affection with her usual warmth, and her perfume was different, more intense, as if she were trying to mask something. "I decided I was missing out on important things by being away so long," I replied, studying every detail of her face. "Sometimes you don't realize what you have until you stop to really look at it." During dinner at Le Bernardin, I was deliberately attentive and charming. I wanted to see how far Sarah would take the charade, how long she could keep up the act of the devoted wife, while planning to steal me away behind my back. "Sarah, I've been thinking a lot during this trip," I said, delicately cutting my fish. "Maybe I've been too selfish with my work. How about we take a vacation together, just the two of us?" I saw the momentary panic in her eyes. "Vacation now? Why not? We could go to Costa Rica, stay at a secluded resort, do yoga on the beach." I smiled, dropping the first subtle hint. "You like yoga, don't you?" Sarah almost choked on her wine. It was exactly the reaction I was hoping for. Yes, I started taking some classes recently, to relax, you know." "That's great. Exercise is important for mental health," I said casually. "And the instructor, is she any good?" Her heart was clearly racing. She's a woman. Her name is Linda. I nodded slowly, memorizing the lie. Sarah was sinking deeper and deeper, and I was just getting started. On the way home, I remained silent, letting the tension build. When we got to the apartment, I went straight to my home office. I had important calls to make to Rebecca and James, finalizing the last details of my strategy. The next morning during breakfast, Sarah mentioned that she had a yoga class at 10. It was the perfect opportunity. What a coincidence, I was thinking of checking out the studio where you take classes. Would you like to join me today? Join me? Sarah stammered, clearly panicking. Sure. You said yoga is relaxing. Maybe I need to relax too. I smiled, savoring every second of her growing desperation. What's the name of the place again? Sarah was visibly cornered. Namaste Studio, but Marcus, they're beginner classes you might find. Perfect. I love new challenges. On the way to the studio, I watched Sarah send frantic messages on her phone, probably alerting her lover about my unexpected presence. When we arrived at Namaste Studio and I met Dylan Rodriguez in person, everything was confirmed. He was exactly like in Rebecca's photos, young, attractive, with that hippie charm that some women find irresistible. But what caught my attention the most was the obvious chemistry between them, the familiarity they tried to disguise as an instructor-student relationship. Nice to meet you, I said, shaking his hand with excessive force. Sarah talks so much about you, I mean about your classes. During class, I performed each pose with athletic precision. My years at the gym hadn't been in vain. But my eyes never left Sarah and Dylan's every interaction. When he made a posture adjustment on her, I saw the real intimacy behind the, professional touch. At the end of class, I approached Dylan with my best business smile. Excellent class. Tell me, do you offer private sessions? We do, Dylan replied, trying to keep his tone professional while visibly sweating. Great. I'd like to schedule one for my wife. Something special. I'll pay well for personalized service. I saw Sarah go completely pale. She knew I knew, and now I was just playing with them. When we left the studio, I put my arm around Sarah with a possessiveness she had never felt before. What an interesting instructor, I murmured in her ear, my voice low and deliberately threatening. He seems to know you very well for someone who just started lessons. Sarah couldn't respond. The Catan-Moose game was over. Now it was time for real revenge. The following Monday, I dressed in my best suit and checked my emails one last time. Today would be the day Sarah discovered how deeply she had underestimated the man she married. I'm leaving early today, I announced, kissing her forehead, with calculated coldness. I have some important meetings. Don't wait up for dinner. In fact, I only had one meeting with my lawyer to finalize the last legal details. The rest of the day would be spent watching Sarah discover the reality of the situation she had created. At 10:30 a.m., my phone rang. It was Sarah, and her voice was completely desperate. Marcus, what did you do with the bills? Oh, you tried to access the money today. How interesting. I paused, dramatically savoring the moment. Sarah, do you remember what you signed when we got married? Prenuptial agreement, she whispered, and I could hear the growing desperation in her voice. Exactly. Which specifies that in the event of proven marital infidelity, the guilty party forfeits all rights to any division of assets. And honey, I have some very interesting photos of you and your yoga instructor. The silence on the other end of the line was delicious. But that's not even the best part, I continued, allowing the smile to show in my voice. You see, while you were playing house, I moved all the major assets into offshore trusts that I set up years ago, long before we were married. The apartment. Technically, it belongs to a corporation in the Cayman Islands. The company's structured through international holding companies. The accounts you thought were ours. They were just operating accounts with a fraction of the real money. You planned all this. Sarah, I've been a businessman for 15 years. The first rule of business is always to protect your assets before someone tries to steal them. The second rule is always to have an exit plan. I could hear her breathing become uneven, probably realizing for the first time the magnitude of the situation. And since we're clearing things up, I continued, you might want to know that your boyfriend isn't exactly who you think he is. What are you talking about? Dylan Rodriguez has 3 outstanding arrest warrants in California for financial fraud. He's pulled the same scam on 2 other married women in the last 5 years. He usually disappears with the money as soon as he gains access to the accounts. I heard a muffled scream, probably Sarah confronting Dylan with this information. That's not true, I heard her shout in the background. Oh, he's there. Tell him the federal marshals are on their way. I'm sure he'll want to leave before they arrive. Over the next few minutes, I heard the sound of running footsteps, a door slamming, and then just the sound of Sarah's heavy breathing. Marcus, she whispered into the phone. I can explain. You don't need to explain anything, Sarah. You made your choices. Now you're going to live with the consequences. I let my voice drop to ice. Oh, and about the apartment, you have until Friday to remove your personal belongings. After that, the locks will be changed. Where am I going to go? I have no money, no job. You should have thought of that before you tried to steal from me, honey. Good luck with your new life. I hung up the phone and leaned back in my office chair. 5 years of marriage were over, but I had learned a valuable lesson about trust and asset protection. An hour later, James Morton walked into my office with a bottle of 25-year-old scotch. Is it over? He asked, pouring 2 drinks. Completely, I replied, accepting the glass. Sarah is officially broke without a lover and without a home. And best of all, she can't sue me for anything because technically I didn't do anything illegal. I just protected assets that were already legally protected. And Dylan? He ran when he found out the FBI was after him. He's probably already in another state looking for his next victim. James raised his glass. To men who think 5 steps ahead. To men who learn from the mistakes of others, I replied, raising my glass. Sarah had forgotten not just one detail, but several. The prenuptial agreement she had signed without reading it thoroughly. The complex legal structure that had protected my assets for years. And, most importantly, she had underestimated the intelligence and planning of a man who had built an empire through strategy and caution. That night, as I dined alone at the same restaurant where I had confronted Sarah days earlier, I reflected on the situation. I felt no satisfaction at my revenge, but rather a deep relief at having escaped a marriage based on lies and greed. Sarah Chen was officially back where she started. In fact, she was worse off than when I first met her. And for the first time in 5 years, she would have to discover who she really was, when there was no money or men to define her identity. As for me, Marcus Chen was free, financially secure, and ready to rebuild my personal life with the lessons learned from this devastating but educational experience. The game was over, and there was only one winner.